Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Middletown School Committee meeting to order on May 9th, 2022 at 4:44 PM. Not all members are present. Mr. Arnold is not able to make it this evening. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Should move over next to me. Okay, I'm so far away. Okay. So we also have a Zoom. I don't know if anybody's on the Zoom. So today we are here to update and discuss the Newport Middletown School Regionalization Plan with the Middletown School Committee. And we have our lawyer here, our legal counsel, Sean.
Hello, members of the committee. Brief update on the status of Newport Middletown School Regionalization. Last week at a town council meeting, both Ms. Vera Fenton and Ms. Spangler were present, as well as myself, at a town council meeting where legislation was being presented to the town council for the purposes of their consideration. The way that this process would work if the two towns, city and town, were to regionalize, the legislation would need to be forwarded from both the city of Newport, their city council, and the Middletown Town Council. Upon approval, that would then be considered by the General Assembly. The General Assembly would then vote to approve or disapprove. In all likelihood, the General Assembly typically follows the recommendation of the local delegations. That would be your representatives from both Newport and Middletown. At which point a referendum will be placed on the ballot in November, and the voters of both Newport and Middletown can vote to consolidate the two districts. At which point that would, if that is approved, it will then trigger a transition period. And that transition period, I believe, will last approximately 2 years or until 2024, where things will start to be, the regional school committee will be selected. The regional school committee will start gaining some of its authority. And at a certain point in time in 2024, the local school committees, this committee as well as Newport School Committee, will be formally dissolved, and then the regional school committee will officially take over. That is clearly a high-level view of what's going on. There are a lot of different facets to this. Some are include what happens with existing contracts that are in play with the school departments, what happens with employees that, because of the consolidation, there are certain positions that are no longer required, or there is a conflict and there's just more people than there are spots. What happens with those? What happens with debt that exists for both school departments, debt that already exists, debt that will be accrued in the future? There are issues such as representation on the regional school committee. How will Middletown be represented? How will Newport be represented? How will those people be elected? There is issues of building committees that are appointed by the regional school district. What representation will be on those building committees? And of course, then there is conversations about funding. How will this regional school district be funded? Right now, you're funded via your tax base here in the town, as well as through funding from the state and federal government. There are discussions about how that will look vis-a-vis Newport paying their share and Middletown paying their share, and what that will look like. There is and then there is a finance committee that will be appointed that will have control and approval of a budget, and how that budget process will work, from a school building principals all the way up to a new regional superintendent, then to the regional school board for approval, and then finally to a regional finance committee that will oversee that function and give final approval. So these are all the pieces. And again, I'm still giving you a very general overview of all that. Meeting that was held with the town council lasted approximately 3.5 to 4 hours, where they hashed through line by line, the legislation that has so far been proposed. Post that meeting last week, Newport and their school committee met in executive session and presumably did a similar function of talking about this. And now we're at a point where our understanding is on Wednesday, there is a meeting with the town council, and the school committee has been invited to discuss some of these issues. And we can talk about that meeting and what that may look like. But right now, that's kind of the overall picture. We can get into some details about some things that you may have concerns about. I don't know if there are any particular areas of concern that the school committee members have. We can certainly talk about them. Both the chair and Ms. Vera Fenton were present. If they have anything they'd like to add, or if there's something you think I missed or should double down on in terms of explanation, I'll try my best to do that.
So the difficulty is that with this meeting being an executive session, obviously they sealed the minutes. So not this meeting, but the town council meeting that we went to the other day. So that's very difficult. I still do not understand why this is an executive session. That doesn't make any sense. But now we have the meeting coming up on Wednesday, and we couldn't bring everybody last time because we didn't post in time. So that's why only 2 of us could go. However, to post for Wednesday's meeting going into executive session is a concern. Again, even though we can all be there because we had enough time to post. But apparently this type of thing is not something that is under the guidelines for
Yeah,
executive session. You can help with that.
I can certainly speak to that. So both under Newport's posting as well as Middletown's posting last week and Middletown's current posting for this upcoming meeting, both Ben Scungio and I have looked at those and we have some concerns about hosting that in executive session. As you're aware, there are certain exceptions in which you can hold your meeting of school committee in an executive session. Those typically pertain to personnel issues, school student discipline issues, collective bargaining negotiations, and receiving legal advice. Those are some, not all, but some of the exceptions. And the posting that the city of Newport and that the town of Middletown is using, we do not feel is sufficient for executive session. The type of conversations that are occurring in executive session, or that appear to be for them, the type of conversations that they seek to have in executive session, both Ben Scungio and I feel are not appropriate for executive session. These are matters of public concern about the elimination of school committees and about the regionalization of school districts. It is about representation, both of Newport and Middletown. It is about the topics that I addressed. To the extent that legal advice is given, it is legal advice in the sense that it is an explanation of what legislation says. The reason you go into executive session for legal advice is you want to maintain your attorney-client privilege. And that certainly would be something you could do in executive session. But with the school committee present at the meeting on Wednesday night, there is no attorney-client privilege.
Careful, we don't want to lose that opportunity to go.
So those are some of the concerns relative to the posting that I think you have to be aware of. Ultimately, it's your call whether or not you wish to attend at those
As a full body.
as a
We're
full body.
going, we're going. The question is, do we go as the full body of us? And potentially be in violation of the Open Meeting Acts, or do we go back again to two of us going with Sean? And that was the big thing I wanted to talk about today, is that's a question that I have for the rest of you. I don't want to be in violation of anything, that's for sure.
What's the pros and cons of if we decide to go as a committee? What violations,
You could be,
What
you as a body
happens?
could be subject to a finding by the Attorney General's office or Superior Court that you violated the OMA. I'm giving you this advice. You could be subject to a willing and knowful violation. Those are some of the concerns that we would have.
Okay. You posted executive.
But there is nothing stopping the committee from sending the chairperson and its legal representatives to the meeting, just like happened in last week, and then reporting back.
but if it's their executive session,
Doesn't matter, we have to post. Remember that we didn't post last time, so we
Right,
couldn't
yes.
go. So we posted for executive session, but we really aren't going into executive session. We're going into their executive session. That's the other thing, is why can't we go into their executive session? We posted a meeting.
You as a board have a responsibility to post anytime a quorum is present.
Right, so if we're posting that, but it's not our meeting. I don't understand.
You're still posting, you're still required to follow the OMA. Just because you're meeting with some other body that has also posted does not change the analysis. You are required, when you are meeting, whether you're meeting with another body or individually as a committee, you're required to follow the OMA. It doesn't matter that a town council or another school committee also happens to have a posting. You're
Has
responsible.
Wednesday been posted as an executive meeting
Mhm.
mm,
For us and them.
for us and them? And so I don't see the problem, Sean.
Because what he's saying is that these topics are not executive session material. That's
mm,
what he's saying. You go into executive session for personnel,
Personnel.
you
and
go
that's-
into executive session for grievances, which is personnel, anything to do with personnel, really, that's when that's when we go into executive session.
yes.
Right.
And we're
Sure,
not
and
talking
this
about
is-
any of those things.
Why does this Wednesday have to be executive?
Well,
Well, the
it's their meeting.
council has noticed it as executive session, so the expectation would be if the school committee was going to meet with them, the school committee would post an executive session agenda.
Because we have to post in order for them to, if we're gonna have a quorum, we have to post something.
Okay, can we discuss now what they're gonna be discussing Wednesday?
Well, this
Obviously, the
Some
this is update,
regionalization.
this is under an
school
update and discussing
committee.
the Newport's Middletown School Regionalization Plan, so yes. Yeah, we can talk about those things. What, you're questioning me.
No, I'm not questioning you.
No, it's fine.
I think we need to be tactful in how we have an open discussion, because if we were in executive session and the minutes were sealed,
Mhm.
whether it's correct or
Yes.
wrong,
Mhm.
Oh,
you were in that
I
executive
underst-
session.
I understand what you're saying. And I do believe that meeting last week was improperly noticed.
Yeah, but
So fine, we don't need to get into specifics.
Right.
If you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine.
So we did receive an update. It's in your
Mhm.
email today with the most recent draft. If you can hand me that back, please.
Yes.
This is- As they stated, this is confidential. We need to respect that. We didn't post it, they did, so we have to keep it confidential. They did make some changes
Mm.
that are different from last week. Obviously, I can't get into detail, but one of the particular things that I'm interested in talking more about is the organization of how the school committee is gonna, the regional school board would be set up. And those are concerns I have. My biggest thing that I feel is important that happens in this, if this happens, is equitable representation between the two districts. And that's something that is really, really critical. So the reality is this. If you go by popular vote, Newport has more voters than we do. It's a larger population in the city compared to Middletown. If you look at the school districts, our school districts are very close when it comes to numbers of students, very close.
So we have to-
It can fluctuate, but a small enough number that it's not significant. So when you talk about per pupil cost, we would be equitable in that sense, in that area. One thing that I don't know information on is their special ed budget. I'm very interested in knowing about that. That's not even in here. I'm concerned about that. Pre-K is another thing that I'm very concerned about. That is only mentioned here for, that it would be a pre-kindergarten through 12 plus other grades. It did say that, so that it leaves it opened
Mm,
to
Sure.
what you had
Yes.
talked about. So those are some significant concerns I have. Sorry, that was the town council alarm reminding me we had a meeting at 6, but we don't, so. So those are two things that are important, and I'm concerned about that of budgetarily, how does that gonna work? Right now, currently Newport's, and this is public data, Newport's per pupil cost is higher than Middletown's. So how would we make that equitable? And then, obviously some concerns with the bargaining units. Apparently and I think I can say this publicly. Obviously, if a new school committee is created, then they would start contracts from scratch. So even though it states that employees would be able to have their pensions and those things would all be the same, obviously you can't take that away from people. That a new school board would create new contracts. But there's 10-year language in here and things like that. That's a big question of where's the equity in setting something like that up?
Now, my question is, the comments and questions that you mentioned earlier, all those things aren't necessarily addressed as this moves forward. Is correct? Like some of those things are,
Mhm.
after it moves forward, we'll address those things.
Correct,
So it's kind of a leap of faith,
correct.
is what we're saying.
So
when
they're
all
saying,
those things that are questionable
they're
don't get
saying
resolved.
we have till August is what they're saying. They would involve the unions, they would involve, the teachers and the union and the Council 94 and everybody, the TAs. But so what they're trying to do is get this in black and white submitted by Monday. Then, as Sean said, then they're gonna look at special ed and pre-K and more of the bargaining units and things of that nature. And then in August, the decision will be whether it goes in the ballot or not. This is in order to even propose it. However, my concern is that if this goes in as is, once it's in, the only way to change legislation is one of two ways. You go up and testify in person, or you can do some writing in letters to the General Assembly. However, I also spoke to one of our legislators, and I was told that typically when a municipality submits something like this, they take it and it's in, and they submit it. So the likelihood of the language being changed in a document like this is slim to none. Can it happen if the General Assembly bounces it back? Yes, the General Assembly's lawyers or legal counsel could say, nope, you need to fix this, this, and this. But typically when a municipality submits something as a body, the General Assembly takes it. Am I correct on that?
Generally, yes, especially if the delegation representing the Newport and Middletown is also in support.
Right.
You know.
So this is a little bit of a concern that I think some people have, is that this is very rushed and very fast.
Is this typical of a regionalization document? Is it lighter? Does it not have typically? does it have-
From what,
Does
from,
it contain more information? Does it
no, from what I can tell, this is fairly typical of a regionalization plan. I know that some things, some provisions were taken from Massachusetts, others were taken from plans to regionalize other school districts throughout the state of Rhode Island. So
And it's common
there's-
to build on this as you go.
certainly, there isn't anything that necessarily is abnormal in the sense that,
Or incomplete or.
Mm,
well, in terms of the legislation itself, it just doesn't flush out
some of those
some of those
Mhm.
issues that have been identified. And to a certain extent, that is appropriate, but that's the way the process would unfold.
Mhm.
Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have, in tandem with the legislation, all those other questions answered ahead of time. You wouldn't necessarily have them put into the legislation. Although I don't think there's anything stopping you from doing so.
Mhm.
But the questions that are being asked, especially from a school committee's perspective, impact on collective bargaining, impact on education. Those things are not going to be answered
Mhm.
before this starts to
Yeah,
move
the whole
forward.
curriculum is not even touched
That's
upon.
after.
And that is a big concern of, well, where does that lead us? I mean, the whole point of educating our children is having a solid curriculum. So that's a concern is the education process. I just don't want this to be rushed because the dollars and cents are dangling. And one question that I don't have answered is, and we have building committee members here, is this a one and done deal? Or is this 80% still available if we did it on next year's election? Am I putting you on the
Next
spot,
year.
Mr. Brady?
Next year or this year?
One of the issues is we are under the gun as a building committee to develop our stage 2 application, which is our conceptual design, our schematic design by February. Is what we were told, okay? So now what the issue at hand here is, we just all of a sudden heard August, there could be a no-go on this whole process. And then the question comes down to is, we have put forth a major effort. I mean, right now, what's going on is our owner's project manager and our architect engineers are redeveloping their proposal to us, because right now, the whole process has changed. It's changed from trying to fix our schools to all new schools. And that's a major effort on the part of the architects. And the architect, for example, is, he's scrambling because he needs to build a big team to do this. I mean, we're going to be required to put 3 schools, a concept and a schematic design, which is doable, but it's going to cost money. And the question is, we're under the impression that RIDE is going to is going to pay for this. But what happens, and I'll be blunt, what happens if they decide in August, hey, deal's off? We've already spent a lot of money and a lot of effort. I mean, I think it's a tough decision. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes to make that decision, but it is a difficult decision because we certainly have a great opportunity if we can make it work.
But I think my question is this, I'm sorry, Lee, you're
No,
gonna,
go ahead.
is this 80% available if we push this legislation off until next year to go into us and do a special
Don't
election?
know. I
That's the
think-
question I want answered is would that 80% still be available if we did this for next election instead?
Alls I know is we were told we've got to get this, we can't go back to them and say, can we delay our stage 2 application beyond February? They've told us February is the date. And therefore, I don't know the answer that you have as to if we put it off. Certainly, putting it off makes some sense, but I don't know if that 82.5% is going to be on the table.
So if February is your deadline and this doesn't pass in November, then
We're still in the same boat.
the deadline doesn't, no, the deadline goes away because then we don't have the 80% reimbursement supposedly because we wouldn't be regionalizing.
Right.
Right? Am I correct on that?
We're just telling you what we've been told.
But if
Okay, that's all I can tell
regionalization-
you.
If the voters, if this goes on the ballot in November and the voters have to vote for 2 things. They
Mhm,
have to vote for regionalization and they have to vote for the bond
Right.
of $225 million. So those are the 2 things that it would be on the ballot. If neither one of those pass,
We still have spent this money, but my understanding is that RIDE has given us the funds and we're not out there on our own doing this, because it's going to be a sizable cost, because again, 3 schools.
Right, so then we go back to square one, and we don't have anything to submit for stage 2, because if we're focusing on 3 schools and then the voters don't vote on it, we're back to square one with our buildings, is that correct?
Correct.
That's
Unless
what I
we
was
want to go on our own for that,
To go back to our $90 million bond.
well, no, or whatever. The problem we have is, don't forget, RIDE was very specific in their refusal of our option F, the 60 million, based on they don't want all this work going on with the schools in session,
Mhm.
because you can't just do this work over the summer.
Mhm.
And they've experienced in other locations, it was very, very difficult. And quite frankly, they told us they want new schools. So we don't know what level of reimbursement we would get.
Go ahead, Lee, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, on this 80 to 82%, is that a guarantee? Is it in writing? So we know,
My understanding is it is in writing. With,
is in
with the
writing.
passage of the vote for regionalization
if
And-
everything goes up,
and, the voters vote, it's locked in.
okay.
But what I can tell you is we're under this deadline that's been given to us by RIDE, that we have to have our stage 2 application in February.
And have you met with RIDE, or is this, through the town councils?
This, no,
the city council.
this is the information that was given to us by our Colliers, by our OPM
Oh, okay.
in our last building committee meeting. Well, we really didn't have an official building committee because we didn't have a quorum.
Oh.
But this is the information that they presented to us.
So they have been in contact with
They,
RIDE.
they
and-
have been working with RIDE on this whole process.
Ed, you told me a few moments ago, what is the reimbursement for Rogers High School?
I was under the impression it was like 52%,
52%.
right?
Okay, a couple of things I've already told you that I'm nervous about the school committee and how they're gonna separate that. And the other thing makes me nervous, borrowing $225 million. I've been told, well, the interest rate will be 3 or 4. I got a feeling might be up closer to 5%. That's gonna really kind of,
But we would.
The bond councils will be the ones that are going to tell you and dictate to what it is.
yeah, well, they're usually 20-year bonds. That's a typical thing for towns.
I would just refer to that, that's something the bond councils are going to work through. But we, as a building committee, my understanding of this process, we probably would see through our plan if we did do the regionalization for the 3 schools. And the other thing to stress, we only have 5 years upon approval from RIDE to pull this off. Which
Why
is
do you say
certainly,
3 schools?
well, I'm just saying is
What?
what we have to realize is what our consultants presented us with was, as Ed referred to, the 50,000 feet.
Mhm.
It is a concept to make certain we can try to secure a level of bondage that will cover the process, that we don't come up short as we try to build these schools. And let's face it, with inflation and everything else going on, it's a tough situation, but our alternatives, quite frankly, are not good.
Now I'm gonna ask Sean a question. I heard many years ago that the school committee, combined whatever, will have authority when they present their budget to the councils, that the budget has to be approved, that the councils will not have jurisdiction. And I think law 16,
A finance committee will be assigned a body of 5.
Right.
And this is another question of, is this body of 5 who's going to be approving budgets or not, be equitable? A big question I have.
Yes.
Okay, what happens, what if we do all this work and we get to the end and we're working and the next council says, I don't want this,
They wouldn't be able to do that.
I mean, this regionalized school board,
No, not the school board, but say like the councils, whoever is putting this together, can they say, no, we don't want to go down this path anymore because it's costing us too much money? Or is this set in stone?
You're saying the regionalization.
Yes.
I don't have an answer for that.
So the answer to that is upon approval by the voters,
Right.
that is your last step. And then that legislation is enacted. The intent of the voters is we're going to move in towards regionalization. That transition period begins. The legislation does have a withdrawal clause, so a town can withdraw from the regionalization. But it has to go through a similar process where legislation is submitted, the voters of that town have to vote to withdraw. It's a long process. It's not just simply town council meets, says,
Yes, right.
we're going to change our minds now a year into it or something. And poof, we're back out in our own district. It just is not
Okay.
that straightforward. There's a
right.
new process in order to unravel everything. So it's not impossible to
Yeah,
withdraw, but
there's a due
it's a
process. Mhm.
cumbersome process.
Mhm.
Okay.
And again, the building committee and the meeting on Wednesday conflict.
Yes, and that's, we're trying to get a feel for a quorum right now.
Which is unfortunate.
Which is unfortunate because we were considering going to another night to try to widen things up, because let's face it, we don't want to start getting into Friday nights.
Mm.
Been there before. You have 6. Okay. We're still not there yet then.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate your
Yes,
input. One thing I did want to comment on too was, when we talked, mentioned special ed and pre-K. Also the administration.
Mm.
And I brought that up, and where are they going to be housed? How is this going to work? When I brought it up at the building committee, I was told not to worry about it at the time, and brought it up the other day. And so that is something that I think is an important feature here of, we're going to be creating a whole new admin team if this goes through. Where are they going to live? And I don't mean residentially. I mean, where's the
Yeah.
department going to live? Where's that housed? So that's something else that's not in here. And I know there's so many unanswered questions, and I do understand that that legislation has to be put forward, but I think that there's just a lot of unanswered questions, and I don't know how, when this public meeting is going to be able to allow the public to put their input.
Before the legislation goes
Before
in,
Monday.
It'd be pretty quickly. like
Yeah.
After Wednesday, right?
But they'd have to post that.
but they would have to post.
Need
it
48
first.
hours to
Right.
post.
I mean, that's the main way for
And not the
finding out
weekends.
when
Income
when
weekends.
it's gonna happen, unless the council has a plan. You look for the posting and that's when you know. So unless the council's declared that, okay, on this date, we're gonna have a public hearing or a public meeting in regards to consideration of this legislation, which I'm not aware of, you wait for the posting.
So that would have to come Wednesday.
Yeah,
They'd have to post.
Post by Wednesday.
Well, Wednesday's the executive session. They'd have to
Right.
post tomorrow for
Tomorrow
Thursday. They'd have to
for
post
Thursday.
Wednesday for Friday.
And that's it.
And then
Those are
Monday, the
options.
16th, I believe, is
Yes.
when they're having a meeting to vote on this or not.
and then it goes up to-
And both Newport and Middletown are having the meeting.
Apparently so. I don't know all those.
And they have to, that has to
details.
happen in agreement in order for even.
Correct. So they met with Newport the other day. This is what came out of our meeting on Wednesday, their meeting on Thursday. Some point over the weekend, they're tweaking it. So this is where it's at. So the question I have for all of you is, what's your pleasure? Do we take this risk of going into an executive session and potentially have a violation for the OMA, Open Meetings Act, or do we go with two representatives again, and Sean will be there as our,
Can I ask Sean
Fine
one
person.
question before you continue? Are we going to combine, if we combine the administrative, is that also the finances, the finance directors? Are they combined? Is it one taking care of both the Newport and Middletown?
so you would have one central regionalized administration. So you would have a finance director for the Newport Middletown Regional School Department.
You have one superintendent. But you would need, see, they say that there's a huge cost savings in admin, and I'm trying to
They're
figure that
wrong.
out because you still would need for a district with 4,500 children and, you know, 400 teachers or 500 teachers. I don't know how many teachers Newport has, but we have 210 approximately. I mean, they've got to be close to that same number as we are, so you're talking over 400 teachers. You still need to have, the staff and you need to have the administration team. You still need principals. You're gonna have our own buildings. You still need teachers in each classroom. You still need custodians. So there's a very big question about where's the cost savings of that. And so we asked about a cost analysis for those numbers that they were putting out, and they don't have those numbers yet. They're saying the cost analysis will come in the next couple of months after this goes to legislation. So am I correct on that? That was,
That's my understanding, is that a lot of the questions impacting education directly,
Come after.
costs, administration consolidation,
Right, all the
will
big
all be,
questions.
there'll be discussions after the legislation has moved forward.
So back to attending, to attend or not to attend.
yeah,
Newport is attending, right? They're,
The meeting,
they're,
Wednesday
they're
night?
having the same, they're having the executive same scenario.
yes.
And their whole school committee
Yes.
is going.
I don't know that, I don't know that
Don't
the
know?
whole committee.
Okay, I was
school committee's
wondering.
going. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
They
I
did
was
the other
curious
day.
to
They
see
met.
if
Right.
they were doing the same
Yes.
thing or not. I was wondering.
Will teachers be able to switch schools, go from Newport to Middletown or back and forth? Will that be allowed?
that is a question that we don't have an answer to yet. You know, obviously, there's consolidation that will take place. But what that actually looks like is not going to be ironed out until later.
And even if something should happen after the legislation has gone in and we start meeting and so forth, if somehow something happens, you know, is it too late to stop the train or the train is
Well,
left at
It
the
sounds to
station?
me, if I'm understanding what the council has put forward, is that there is an escape hatch when it comes to putting the referendum on the ballot.
Mhm.
And I'll just say with the asterisk on that, that's something I would like to look into. If in fact the legislation is passed, can the council decide to not put a referendum on the ballot? I don't know the answer to that question, but it has been represented that it can, meaning that if it were to go sideways or they, you know, comes to light that they're not going to get the savings that they initially anticipated, they would vote to not put the referendum to the voters in this upcoming election, then there's nothing to vote on, no voter approval.
And it-
The
ends.
plan ends at that point. But there is a question about whether or not the council can decide that. So that's something I need to get an answer to you for. But
Okay.
again, the council has suggested that it can do that.
Legally, what would our responsibilities be to set up this? You know, since we're not invited to participate until after it goes in, can we change things this summer and fall? You know, can we meet?
When you say change things, you mean change, I mean, the legislation is going to be what the legislation is. That can't be.
No, you're
that
right,
can't be
but
changed.
say we wanted to add something, you can't do that. So you can't add or take away anything from the legislation at the
Well, there is
General
a period of
Assembly?
time where you could in theory submit an amendment to the legislation, a sub A, the council, but both Newport and Middletown would have to agree on that, and then it would be sent up. And so in theory, yes. In practice, it seems to me that,
Mhm.
you know, it would be difficult to start amending things as it starts to move forward, given the fact that the timeline is such that they're talking about getting this in next week. Presumably, that needs to be in so the General Assembly can do its business and
Right.
consider the legislation in a timely fashion.
I got a question. Does your law firm represent Middletown? Do you have anything to do with Newport?
We have nothing to do with Newport,
Thank you.
and we only, and just to clarify, we only represent the Middletown School Department.
Okay, thank you.
Just the school district, and then the town has
Has
their
their own.
legal counsel.
Mhm.
So I think that's as much as we can talk about at this point.
Mm.
Yeah.
We need to make a decision about Wednesday. I am recommend, before I say anything, Ed, did you want to say something else?
No, I'm good at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything?
Come on.
Yes.
Come on, Charlie, we want to hear from you.
Yes.
Charlie Roberts, co-chair as well. We're kind of in the dark here a little bit as well. We're trying to manage this best we can. We're probably going to cancel our building committee meeting on Wednesday because we don't have a quorum because most people have to attend this meeting. So, that's basically where we're at. I don't know. We're going to attend the meeting tomorrow night. There's a meeting tomorrow night, right?
No,
Oh, that's been
Where?
canceled.
No, that's been
town
canceled.
council,
and it's on
town hall
Wednesday.
cancel.
That's going to executive session Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay,
Correct.
so, yeah, so we won't be
Check it out.
attending tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
So you,
we're kind of in holding pattern for the building committee
right,
until
until you know what's going on with
what's
us.
going on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Um,
Go ahead.
So what would you recommend our next steps be? I mean,
My recommendation to the next steps is if you want to be involved in the conversation, that similar to last week, you have the chairperson and yourself or someone else from the committee, but the chairperson and myself attend the meeting on Wednesday as discussions continue, and then you report back to the committee at your next scheduled meeting, which I believe is the following week.
hmm,
And
Actually,
you-
it's the 18th.
Oh,
Don't
18th.
mess me up.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
It's the
And then-
18th. It's Wednesday afternoon, not,
And then you just
Thursday
have
morning.
you an update at that point, so all the other members are apprised of what is happening. And
I
I
ha-
think, I would assume at that point that the legislation would be much more final, so you can have maybe a more detailed discussion about the legislation, so the school committee members and the public can understand what's
but
going
we
on.
will not be able to put input from, the students, the teachers, the staff. and us.
Well,
I
other
mean-
than at a public school committee meeting where
You could
you would,
have that
similar
dis-
to a news, agenda item like this, where
Like an
people wanted to
update.
speak their mind relative to the general concept of regionalization. I mean, anyone at this point, if allowed by the chair, could come up and talk about their feelings and thoughts about regionalization. I don't think anyone would have a concern about that, hearing from the public.
Is
Well-
it required that there's a public meeting following the executive session Wednesday before
Well, you have to,
Monday? Is that
there's nothing,
required?
no, there's nothing that requires,
Doesn't have to
I
happen.
mean, in terms of a public meeting, like, yes, you literally are in public session, go into executive session, come out into public session, adjourn your meeting, but there's no requirement that there be an agenda item to have any sort of subsequent
Discussion, or hear
discussion.
From the
Okay,
public,
yeah.
or there's none of that? Okay.
No,
I didn't know if that was required before it went on Monday.
no, well, presumably if they're gonna have a vote to approve the legislation, that will be held in public session.
Okay. And when would that have to happen by?
Well, do they have a date yet for when they're gonna have a vote on this? No.
My understanding was they were meeting on the 16th.
Yeah.
The town council's meeting on the 16th, and they're gonna vote, and it's due on the 16th.
All right, so that would be it.
would
I mean, I think it would be extremely unusual if that vote was held in executive session.
Okay, so I'm gonna request that, Mrs. Fonseca, you take down the posting. We cancel our meeting because I really think at this point with the information that we know, we should do it correctly and not go into executive session to discuss something
Right,
like this,
yeah.
which is not
Yeah, that's-
qualifying for executive session discussion.
You're talking
So-
about canceling Wednesday.
Canceling our meeting on Wednesday. Right,
At the police
The
station.
at the, is that
No.
where it's at?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I just knew it was placed to be determined.
Yes, police station.
Okay,
Yeah, it's at the police
so
station.
it's at the police station and that only two of us go
Right.
with Sean. So, Lee, I know you came last time. I don't know if you want to come again or do
May
you
I?
want Tammy to come? And yeah, you're welcome to come.
And
Absolutely.
I'll
sir.
talk to you later. Yeah. but
So,
I would like to,
would like some feedback though between now and then. Take a look at this document. Remember, it is confidential based on the
Right.
instructions from the town council. Get me your notes as soon as we can, and then we will go with Sean again and see what's going on and report back to you on the 18th at 3:30. So Wednesday, Lee and I.
Okay.
okay.
So
On
Wednesday, the 8th,
Wednesday.
Wednesday, the 18th,
What time is the meeting on
Three-
May 18th,
May 18th is Wednesday, a week from
Wednesday?
this, yeah, next Wednesday
At what
at
time?
3:30 here. Then we have a 6 o'clock at Town Hall
Thank you.
for budget.
Did they move that?
Or did they move that?
Did they move the
never
budget?
got
That's the one we're not sure about. We'll
Yeah.
check on that
I'm
tomorrow.
gonna check
again.
tomorrow and I'll send a list of everything that's coming up.
Okay.
So the one you
Okay.
sent us last week has changed already? Oh,
Mhm.
okay,
We'll just make sure.
okay.
Yeah.
No.
Either way, we will start here at 3:30 on Wednesday, the 18th.
Yes.
And we will go from there.
18, 3:30,
And then
6 o'clock is the budget.
Presumably to the town.
I don't know.
council at
Mary's gonna
6.
confirm that.
Yes, so maybe. Now, do you need me to call
Okay.
you?
I thought that was our budget meeting.
Yeah, it's,
So it's just the town council and us.
Okay,
so on the
What-
Middletown site, it says, a special town council hybrid unification meeting canceled for Tuesday, right? May 10th.
Yep.
But it doesn't say, and then
Change to Wednesday.
the 16th, right?
Nope.
the 18th.
The 16th is,
The 11th.
no, wait a minute. The 16th is definitely a town council meeting.
Mhm.
So the public discussion will take place at the Wednesday. the
And I
16th.
do believe that that's on their agenda to vote on.
If I may make a suggestion,
Yes.
if the assistant superintendent, because this is getting a bit confusing, I think, for
Yeah.
everyone. Tomorrow morning, if the assistant superintendent to send out a tentative schedule,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
so everyone is kind of in a loop. Again, acknowledging that subject to change, these meetings are coming and going very quickly, getting canceled and rescheduled, so.
I think the most important thing is that we take down the posting for
Mhm.
this Wednesday's meeting and that not all of you attend, but just have 2 of you
Yes,
with Sean.
yeah.
That changes, just email
If
us.
it changes, we'll let you know, but that's where we are. Because once we take it down, then
We can't put it back
Can't
up.
put it
It's
back on.
5:30 now.
it's 5:30 now. Yeah.
Right,
Right.
so once we take it down,
It's
we
good.
can't, we're done. All right, so
We're going
we need to
Wednesday.
vote on that, or I just make the
No.
executive decision to take it down, and we all agree on it. Okay. All right, so that's it in a nutshell. If anybody has any more questions, or we call it a day? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn at 5:31 PM. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.